Our scripture reading this morning is from Joshua chapter 3, verses 5 through 8. Joshua told the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." Joshua said to the priests, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people." So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river."
We're going through this series of heroes in the Old Testament, and this one just really timely for me, I guess. This passage today. There are so many times where I just, I know that God can do anything, and that He created everything, and man, He's more powerful than I, but, there's always those doubts, if I'm going to be honest with you, like, if I pray over this, is it going to be a waste of my breath? Am I going to pray and just be so emotionally, mentally, and spiritually involved in this particular prayer subject that it's never going to happen, and I'm going to be left disappointed? And we have to understand that the Israelites were going through the same thing in this book. In fact, they not only, some of our, by the way, our prayer requests, they last a few weeks or something like that, or if you're called into the boss's office, maybe from your cubicle to the boss's office, that's how long that prayer is. Or, our prayers, they're, sometimes for us, they're time sensitive. Say, God, if you are God, if you get this done by this time, and all of that. And whether we like to admit it or not, that's kind of sometimes how we operate. Oh, might not use that today. How about we'll just hold it. We don't like to say it because we're good Christians, right? We don't like to believe that when we pray something, that we put timetables on God. But we know we do. Another thing is, we might be praying for something for so long. And then what if, crazy scenario here, what if God makes it happen? What if God answers that prayer? Here's exactly what happens. Well, at least for me. Is that I am unbelievably surprised that this happened. Even though I've been praying about this thing for so long. And there's a lot of things going on in my life right now that I've been praying for, and God actually brings them to fruition. And I think, well, God, I didn't expect that. How many times do we do that? Let's be honest. You see, that one of the things I think that we lack, if I'm just going to throw this out here, and you can take it as a judgment, of a heavy-fisted judgment, or just as an observation. Sometimes we pray a lot, but we pray a lot without anticipation. And I think that there is something that's very, very dark about that. That there is just this storybook God that we think is a great idea that has no power in our lives whatsoever. Maybe that's an indictment on me. So, let's set the scene here. Let me paint the picture of the story. Some of the story you know. Okay, you've heard it before. If you've stepped foot in a church at any point in time in your life, which I know you have, you've all been there before, you know the story. And that was, Moses was able, and we talked about this last week actually, Moses was able to lead through God's grace and favor an entire people group out of an entire people group. The Israelites came out of Egypt. And here they were promised, fast forward, they were promised the promised land. It was this land that was going to be theirs. is this land that was going to be fertile ground, it was going to provide everything that they needed, and it was going to be a home. It's going to be a home for them. And when they were walking through the wilderness is where they were led out, because basically, if we were to look at the map, oh, it's just right there. Why couldn't they have just walked right across and went over here? You know, sometimes look at a Bible map and track their figure 8 pattern of wilderness journey. Because it's really funny. Well, it's not funny. It probably wasn't funny to them. But you're screaming at them saying, it's right there. Why don't you just walk? Right there. But what we found out was that God was leading them in figure 8s and triangles and circles and all those kind of things, not only to prepare them for what they were going to receive. Number 2 was He was preparing the place that He was going to have for them. Number 3, there had to be the right people in place to receive it. You know, there wasn't just anybody, but it was the people that were going to receive it. Well, and another reason, number 4, if we were to add number 4, was because when He took them in figure 8 patterns and all over the wilderness, all that, He was often helping them to avoid confrontation. Because there were a lot of people, but they were not really that militarily sound. You know, they're a bunch of farmers and a bunch of traders and all of those kind of things. Not really built for battle. And we see this later on in Scripture that they were so not built for battle that when God called them into battle, their knees shook. We've never done this before.
Right.
So God sent them all around the wilderness, and it took 40 years. 40 years. This wasn't a prayer that God took care of overnight. This wasn't something that, and you can imagine, by the way, that a lot of these people that were traveling in the wilderness, some of them lost faith, let's just be honest. Some of them just got so upset with God because you promised us this. Yeah, I know you just made water come out of rock, but man, Lord, where are you? I know that you just had food literally dropped from the sky so that it would be there for us every day. But where are you, Lord? Why haven't you answered our prayer? You know, come on. Let's just be real with what they were feeling, because we felt that way too. 40 years. And I can't emphasize that enough. And it came to the point where Moses just got so frustrated with these people. Like every time, and he probably was kind of frustrated with God too, because it can make him look bad. The God that had promised him that the promised land was going to be there, you know, if you're looking at your pastor saying, well, you told us that this vision was going to come to fruition. Where is it? You know, it's impatience. We all have it. So they're traveling for 40 years, and I don't really know, to be honest with you, if I can call this impatience, because man, it's 40 years, come on. I think that's a whole new category. I don't think you call it impatience. I think at that point you just call it, I don't know what you call it. You know, it's something, you know. I've been pretty patient for many years before on certain subjects. 40 years. That puts me into the negatives, if you know how old I am. So here is Joshua, leader of the people. Right before this, Moses had died. Moses had led the people all the way to the edge. Man, could you imagine how frustrating that would have been? Because it was towards the end of Moses' leadership that he didn't believe God, he didn't trust God, he didn't obey God. So God says, okay, well, I have still this promise for all of you, but Moses, you're not going to be able to see it. Right there. I mean, he was literally, if you look at geographically where he was, he is literally on the side of a mountain looking over into where it's going to be. And they camped there for quite a while. They camped there for quite a while because of fear, because they didn't believe God had the best for them. They could have cut this for they could have cut a couple years off of their camping, you know. And because of that, God says, Moses, you're not going to get to take care of this. And Moses, you know, while hurt, understood. So they appointed Joshua next in command. Moses dies, and Joshua takes the people to the promised land. But there's some other stuff that happened before that. There's one particular instance in which Moses, when he was alive, sent 12 spies into Canaan. And he thought, I think this is where God wants us to go, but I'm not really sure, so I'm going to send 12 spies just to kind of, they're not going to make any trouble for anyone. They're just going to walk in, look around, sample the food. You're in Costco right now, sample the food, or Sam's Club. Oh man, I'll tell you what, that's a place where dreams are made. And literally that's what the Bible says. They're supposed to go in, sample the goods, sample the food, bring back some stuff, bring back some berries and some, fruits and vegetables and things, and just to see what the place is like, Hey, report to us what you think. And these 12 spies, 2 of them being Caleb and Joshua, go in there, and all they see are really big people with swords and shields and all those kind of things, because they saw the soldiers kind of walking around, and they also saw that maybe these buildings weren't exactly what we're looking for. They saw all of these things, and they came back, all 12 of them. 10 of those said, "This is not the place for us. Have you seen those swords? Come on." And then 2 of them, Caleb and Joshua, said, our God's bigger than that. Yeah, it's some scary stuff. It's, admittedly, their fruits and vegetables are pretty good. It's a land of milk and honey.
Sounds sticky.
Yes, it's sticky. It's a sticky place. No, not literally. But I could see it working. Joshua and Caleb had this vision for what this place could be. God can come in and do some renovation in here, that's fine. And the people can come in and it just looks like a place that every little bit of it seems like we could fit in here. But the other 10, being the majority, comes in and says, I don't know, these guys are really big, it just doesn't seem like a good idea. If you remember, they've been traveling for 40 years avoiding conflict. Okay? So if I walk into your home and say, what's this nice place, I'm going to move in. Some of you would be hospitable enough to say, well, come on in, I got an extra bedroom. My whole family, actually. And then my extended family, and my friends, and just whoever on a whim that I decide. We're all going to move into your house. In fact, could you just kind of move out? You probably would be like, I have some questions. At the very least. So, here come the 12 back to Moses saying, we can't do this. There's a lot of them there, and all the houses are filled, and we're not really good at fighting, so how are we going to make this work? And Moses takes the majority. Okay, well, we just won't go there. But there was something buried in Caleb and Joshua. Joshua in particular, that just couldn't let that place go. I just think that sometimes God plants those kind of seeds that we just, okay, can I just take a little sidestep here and say this? There are some times where we ask a question to the pastor, how do we know it's God's will? Right? You've had that question before. A basic answer to that, not the full answer, is that you can do nothing but. Like, how did I know I was called to ministry? It's because I tried to avoid it. And I could do nothing but. How did I know that I was supposed to come and start a new church? It's because God wouldn't let me go and I could do nothing but. How did I know that I had to be fishers? It's because I could do nothing but. Because sometimes God gets a hold of you and He plants these little seeds. And this was what was happening in the life of Joshua. He just couldn't get around it. He could not go any further until he did what God wanted him to to do. So he comes back, and him and Caleb say, I think it's great. I think the place, I mean, you know, it could use some curtains, but other than that, I could see some potential here. I could see where people could go and fit and stuff like that. It'll take some conflict. Let me just tell you that. That is not going to be easy. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that God is up to something, and I think that we need to be a part of it. So, but, you know, still, Moses said, no, I'm going to go with the majority over here. You know, you can understand why. Makes sense. Moses dies, puts Joshua in charge, and you can just imagine Joshua's like, yes! Right across this river here, God is about to do something amazing.
Yes, amen.
Just, I think I would have been standing behind Joshua while he's looking at me, yes, man, and then when he turns around, you know what I mean? Maybe in public, I'm like, yes, this guy, you know, I'm with this guy. But, yeah, exactly. I mean, he's crazy. I don't even. But Joshua says, in Joshua chapter 3, starting in verse 5, is something that we need to just bury in the deepest parts of our heart. And it's demand. It's not a suggestion. I mean, Joshua was getting a little harsh with them. Joshua is saying in this passage, before I kind of quote the passage real quick, I want to say this, that he is looking at these people and he's saying, we are not going to miss this. We're not going to let it slip through our fingers again. Moses was a great guy. You know, he messed up towards the end, didn't believe God. And, you know, he's going to be in heaven waiting on us. Don't get me wrong. But he did not do what God asked him to do. And now he's not going to get to see what God is about to do. So he says these words. Consecrate yourself. For tomorrow, not today, not weeks from now, tomorrow, God is going to do something great.
Amen.
That word consecrate, I was about to say it in Hebrew. The word consecrate is the word kadesh. Can you say kadesh?
Kadesh.
One of the most amazing things about that word is it doesn't just mean consecrate like hey, I'm going to scrub something up and get it nice and clean. That's not what it means. There is a word that is also translated to consecrate or purify or sanctify, and actually those words are shared, but it's not that one. This one literally means prepare. Prepare yourself, for God is about to do some great things. What kind of great things? Well, we don't know. Exactly what time? Tomorrow, 12:57. Tomorrow. I keep telling Brianna she's going to have a baby tomorrow at 12:57. And prepare yourself. Okay, let me give this as an illustration. This illustration I'm about to give is the picture of what you should think about. Well, the idea, not exactly what I'm about to tell you word for word, of what it means to prepare yourself. So, every morning, I get up and go to the gym, 5 a.m. I'm part of that gym crew. I'm one of those annoying early birds, part of the gym crew. And every night before that, I prepare what I'm going to be taking the next day, what I'm going to be wearing, all these kind of things. I make sure I'm wearing my gym clothes to bed, and all these kind of things. It's a process, And so that way, that whenever I get there, that everything's already done, and I can just walk out the door, just sneak out because everyone's asleep, and I can just go and do what I need to do. Other times, maybe on Thursday nights, whenever I go on Thursday nights instead of Thursday morning, I'll make sure that everything is packed and ready and in my car, and ready to go to the gym after work, before I go home. That's the word that we're looking at here. is that you are making effort, putting energy towards preparing for yourself for something that you know is coming without a shadow of a doubt. You've been promised, you know that it's going to be there whenever you get there. Another illustration might be, let's say you're going to a meeting at work, and you're told that you need to make a presentation, and you're supposed to teach or train your fellow co-workers on this particular thing. Well, you don't just walk in there and just say, well, I'll just wing it, it's fine. No, your boss might look at you a little funny. Maybe not funny, but you prepare yourself. You're putting energy and effort, and you're consecrating yourself, really. Consecrating in this particular passage means that you believe so much in what God has planned that you're willing to put effort into it. So, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Joshua said to the people, to the priests, usually in those days the priests would go ahead, as they were wandering in the wilderness, they'd go ahead and the symbolic act of bringing the Ark of the Covenant before everyone meant that God is going before them. So they believed that wherever they stepped foot, and this is what they were called to believe, so some of them, 40 years doubted a little bit, you can imagine, that they believed that where God has called them to go, He's already there waiting.
Right. Amen.
Right? So this Ark of the Covenant symbolized the very presence of God. They would follow the pillar of fire by night and the smoke cloud by day, and they were just going where they were supposed to go. So these people had heard the stories, and you got to think about 40 years later, this is a whole different people group now. They're the people that started out as maybe adolescents are now grandparents. New babies have been born in 40 years. The population has grown tremendously. They're all living in close quarters. So you can just imagine what the dynamics of that. So 40 years go by, and they've heard the stories of what God has done to their ancestors, or for their ancestors. They promised Abraham that God promised Abraham he'd be a mighty nation. He'd populate the earth. He knew about Adam and Eve that their first call, their first job was to be fruitful and multiply. They knew that God had made water come from rock. That's happened actually a couple times. They knew that manna has dropped down from the sky. They knew that so many things have happened. And one of the coolest things that have ever happened was when they started this journey, was to get away from Pharaoh. He took water and just split it so they could walk through on dry ground.
Yes.
You see, this water story of God taking His power, their faithfulness, their belief, and using all of that together as a soup, a spiritual soup, mixed together, the waters split. At the beginning of this story, of this long story, it was the Red Sea. They had to get out of there so they wouldn't get killed. And we know probably the story that after they got through, the Egyptians were there, the water swallowed them up, and there you go. God protected them. God fought for them. They didn't have to raise a sword. They didn't have to put up their shields. God did that. And then we have the bookend story here, where Joshua says, tomorrow, consecrate yourselves, because tomorrow God is going to do amazing things. They had no idea what he meant by that, but we see later on that they took the Ark of the Covenant, what we just read, went forward, and at the end of this particular passage that we read, they just said, go stick your foot in the Jordan. What you don't see is what goes right after that. And that was when they stuck their foot in the Jordan, the river stopped. A wall of water, dry ground. Once again, bookend story, they were able to walk through. God once again did exactly what He said He was going to do. The question was, were they prepared to receive it? I don't know. Joshua did a good job of telling them, hey, get yourself prepared because God's about to do something amazing. But we can't go survey every single Israelite and see if they were prepared. That's ridiculous. So that's it. That's the end of the story, right? I mean, they went through and claimed their land, uneventful and things like that. No, actually, that was only the beginning. It hurts my heart to think that when we do receive the answer to our prayers, that we think, okay, great, I can just sit back and relax and that's it. Like, Lord, I'm just so tired. You know, He gives us rest periods. Let's just say that out loud. But sometimes I think we forget that the gift that God gives us of the answer to our prayers is only the beginning. How are we going to use that? How are we going to use that to see that the world is absolutely magnified, or the presence of God is magnified in the world? That's what I was trying to say. What do we do on a regular basis that we prepare ourselves, our hearts, our lives, our every day? What do we do for ourselves to prepare ourselves for the answer God has? Do we drag our feet around? Lord, why haven't you answered this? We're human, sometimes that happens, that's fine. Man, Lord, if you would just do what I've asked you to do. Then we get upset because we realize that we've kind of molded God into our own image. He's not doing He doesn't really fit into what we're telling Him to do. But at the same time, that's how we know He's real. He doesn't play by our rules. That's what got Jesus in trouble. In fact, He didn't play by our own rules. So, well, I'm sure some other things got Him in trouble, but, that was one of them. Joshua is making the call to us. And I, as the pastor, I, as your Joshua today, am making the call to you to prepare yourself. Right? For God's about to do something amazing. Do I know exactly what that looks like? No. Do I think I know what it looks like? Maybe. Do I hope I know what it looks like? Oh yeah, 100%. But even Joshua, knowing that God is who He says He is, looked out across the river and said, I know we're supposed to get over there, but I don't see a bridge. I don't see where we're supposed to cross. But God is who He says He is, and I believe that. And He's called us for just a time as this. I mean, this parallels with everything involving ministry 100% of the time. That I can see where God is taking us, I just don't always know how to get there, to be honest with you. And I'm supposed to be, as a pastor, standing up here very confident because I went to seminary, guys, and listen to me, How ridiculous is that? But I'm going to need all your help. Joshua did not carry the Ark of the Covenant by himself. He didn't drag their rumps across the wilderness by himself either. Each day, these Israelites had to get out of their beds, had to pick up their houses, wrap it together, the tents and all that kind of thing, and they had to go. There are times that I can only imagine That Joshua or Moses maybe said something like, okay, we're going to go around this mountain and then go that way, and then wherever the actual route is they were taking. And they were like, we've already been there. And you can imagine sometimes they would see the same tree. And they think, well, that looks a lot like the tree I've seen about 8 or 10 times. And in fact, they would look over and they would see their own footprints. And, yep, I knew it. Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever feel like that you are out in your own wilderness and you see your footprints and you think, I've been here before? But sometimes even when we're doing that, we forget about the faithfulness that God has shown us just about a week ago. Or a month ago, or 2 years ago, or something. Well, He must have left us because I'm not in full comfort right now. I've worked up my emotions to a lather here, so God must absolutely be left us. He must have left us. I just feel like that God, so many times to me, just looks at me and says, just calm your heart. Take one more step. And after you're done with that step, I'll tell you what the next step's going to look like. I might be leading you in a circle, but you've grown on every revolution. I am preparing a place for you. Sounds like John chapter 14 stuff right there. I've prepared a place for you. In my, that's what John chapter 14 says. In my Father's house are many rooms, or many mansions, or many homes. If it were not true, I would have told you. God keeps telling us that it's true. He's not making it up. It's just, are we allowing this time in which we are waiting to be a time of preparation, to be a time of Kadash, consecration of ourselves? Are we allowing the edges to be worn off? Are we allowing the skin to be molted off, if we take the reptile analogy or something like that? Are we allowing ourselves to get ready to receive? Or, if God answers our prayer, we're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. I know He said He was going to do it, but I didn't actually think He would. Let's start today. If that's not your case, let's start today. Consecrate yourselves. And maybe let's give it a full week. Consecrate yourselves, for this week God is going to do something amazing. If you're sitting there in your computer at work or about to go into a meeting, what if you thought to yourselves, what is it I can do today to consecrate myself? To get ready for something amazing God's about to do. We'll call the praise team up. And if you need to pray that prayer today, maybe this is your period or time of response. The altars are open for you. No one's keeping you. And I think that's important to say, by the way. Nobody is keeping you from coming up here and kneeling. I didn't know if you knew that, but there's no rules against it. Just being facetious. The altars are open for you. Be faithful and obedient.